All right. While we wait for the other students, do you have any questions about what we covered last time? Not really. Okay. If you don't have questions, why don't you and I do a quick little review? Okay.
Okay.
We started with our first big economic model, okay, which was the PPF, the Production Possibilities Frontier. Okay, so it is a model. It's a simple way of understanding how the world works. Maybe it's a little bit too simple, okay, to the point where it doesn't really make sense, okay, but it's a good place to start, okay. And the reason why it doesn't make sense is imagine that there's a person, or imagine there's a country that produces two things and only two things, okay. So usually what we call it is just product X and product Y, okay. And what we're doing
Yes.
is we're imagining a situation where we have fixed and limited resources. Okay, the reason is we always want to be producing more X, we always want to be producing more Y. But whenever we're dealing with limited resources, there comes into the idea something called opportunity cost. Okay, so with these limited resources, if you're using more of them to make product Y, well, that means you have less resources left over to make product X. Okay, so as you make more and more of one of these guys, you have to make less and less of the other. Okay, in economics, we call that the idea of a trade off. So with that, we came up with different combinations of x's and y's that we're able to make with our limited resources. We're thinking about the maximum x and the maximum y. And we came up with something, yeah, I guess we could draw it out, okay? Um, it may be something like if I use all of my limited resources to make x and only x, I can make, I don't know, like 1,000x, but zero y. But if I started to make a little bit more y, I have to give up on x. If I want to make more y, I have to give up on x. If I want to make more y, I have to give up on x. So then all we're going to do is in this graph here, okay, we're going to take a look at each one of these points here. So this one was with 1,000 x's and 0 y's. So I guess that's this point here. The next one is 800 x's but 100 y's. Okay, so less x but more y. Okay. Same idea here. Less x but more y. Less x but more y. And then what we're going to do is we're going to connect the dots. And that's going to be our idea of PPF, our Production Possibilities Frontier. So along that blue line, it shows us all the different combinations of x's and y's that we're able to produce with our limited resources. All right, Joseph, does that sound familiar? Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So a couple of the lessons we learned from this PPF. First off, anything on your PPF curve, like this combination of x and y, or this combination of x and y, they're both equally efficient. Okay, and the idea of efficient means none of your resources went to waste. You had nothing left over. All the resources that you had, okay, you used everything up, all the way down to the last drop. That's very efficient, nothing wasted. Okay, so I don't know, let's say point 1 here on your PPF is efficient. Point 2 here on your PPF is efficient. Any point on your PPF curve is efficient, nothing is wasted. Of course, what that means is anything on the inside of your PPF curve, like here, point 3, you are able to make this much X and this much Y, but it's not efficient because you have a lot of resources left over. And remember, for us, for this basic economic model, the PPF, just assume that people want as many products as possible. It's the products that make people happy, not the resources. You don't want to have resources left over. So combination 3 there, you could do it, okay, but it's going to be very wasteful and inefficient. Now, a combination like here, Combination 4. Wow, that's a lot of x's and a lot of y's as well. I would love to be there, but I just don't have enough resources in order to produce that amount. Okay, and the last thing we talked about was, well, how do we get to that amount? How do we increase our PPF? Or how do we make it so that we're able to produce more in the future than we are right now? And it all has to do with this idea. The only reason why we're not able to produce as much as we want to is we don't have enough resources, or in this case, our resources are limited. But somehow, if you're able to increase your limited resources, that means your PPF curve is going to be higher than it was before. You're going to be able to produce more. Okay, so you're going to still be limited, but you're going to be limited at a higher amount of X's and Y's. Okay, so this was the idea of economic growth. Okay, doing more every single year, producing more every single year. And there's only two ways to do it. Okay, you're only going to get economic growth if you increase the quantity or if you increase the quality of your resources. Again, the whole reason why we're limited is because we don't have enough resources. So if we get more resources or better resources, we're going to be able to produce more. Okay, Joseph, are you okay with that idea? All good there? Okay. All right. So related to that idea of our PPF, when we have two products that are very similar to each other, like I think we talked about pie and cake. Okay, what that's going to mean is our PPF curve. It's going to be easy to draw. It's going to be a nice straight downward sloping line. There's our PPF. But what that means is, as I go from point A to point B to point C. So the thing about these PPF curves, it shows you your outer limit, your maximum amount of production you're able to do. Okay, and you're only able to be at one point at a time. So, I mean, point A, point B, point C. Each one of those is on the PPF curve. Each one of those is efficient. No resources are wasted. But which one is better for my country? Well, it kind of depends on what my country wants. Okay, so if my citizens like pie a lot more than cake, then it looks like combination A is better. Or if my country likes cake more than pie, then it looks like a combination C is going to be better. So it's kind of up to the people to decide where to produce. But the thing is, you don't have to stay in one place all the time. It's not like, oh, I decided to be at point A. Well, that's fine. Okay, but there's nothing to say that you have to stay there. Okay, you could always change your mind and decide to do something else. But whenever you decide to do something else, just like in life, there's always going to be a positive and there's going to be a negative. There's going to be some good stuff, there's going to be some bad stuff. Okay, so let's say we're going from point A to point B. Well, the whole reason we did that is we wanted more cake. Okay, so you're increasing the amount of cake you're producing. But the only way that you're able to do that is you need to move some resources away from pie production. Okay, so the only way to gain more cake is you have to lose some pie, meaning there's going to be some opportunity cost there. Okay, it doesn't have to be one-to-one. It could be something like, well, every time you decide to produce 3 more cake, you have to give up on 2 pies. Well, let's do it one more time. Let's go from point B to point C. Well, here again, let's say you're gaining 3 more cakes. That means you have to give up on 2 more pies. So in this case, it looks like our idea of opportunity cost is going to be constant. Constant opportunity cost. kind of tells us, or that comes from the idea that our PPF curve is a nice straight downward sloping line. Okay, and if you haven't figured it out by now, okay, our idea of opportunity cost, what we have to give up on, it's very, very closely related to the slope of the PPF curve. And here, because my PPF curve is a nice straight line, that means it has a constant slope. Okay, that means I'm going to have a constant opportunity cost as well. All right. So that's fine and good. Okay, we see a PPF curve like this for products like pie and cake, or desks and chairs, or iPhones and iPads. What I mean by that is when the two products are very similar to each other, meaning that they use very, very similar resources. Take a look at pie, take a look at cake. We need eggs, we need flour, we need sugar. Okay, and those resources are kind of good for making both pies and cakes. So we're going to have constant opportunity cost there. But when we have a situation where the two products are very, very different from each other. Joseph, can you give me an example? Give me two products that are very, very different from each other.
Let's say an apple and water.
Okay, by apple you mean the fruit, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so apple and water. So let's think about the resources. Okay, so we need, I guess we need seed. Okay, we need fertilizer. Okay, and for the water, I guess we need,
A river.
of course, that makes a lot more sense. Okay, we need a river and we need buckets. Okay, something like that. And of course, our resources have to be limited. Okay, so I only have, I don't know how even to do this. Like, I only have 60 seeds, and I only have 2 bags of fertilizer. I know I only have one river that goes through my town. Okay, and I only have 100 buckets. So those are my resources, and they're very, very limited. Now, with these limited resources, I need to try to make as much or produce as much apples and produce as much water as possible. But here, what you'll see is your PPF curve is actually going to be very, very curved. Okay, your PPF is going to look like this. What we call that is it's bowed outward. Okay, or what we say is it's concave to the origin. Concave to the origin. Okay, it just means it's bumping out. By the way, this is concave, this is convex. A convex PPF curve makes no sense at all. Okay, so you could just completely ignore that. We're only talking about straight line PPFs or concave PPFs. So what makes it so that my PPF curve looks like this? Why is it not a straight line? What we're going to see is if we have bowed outward or concave to the origin PPF, we're going to have increasing opportunity cost. Very different from here. Here we had constant opportunity cost. Again, you could kind of tell that by the straight line PPF. But here we're going to have increasing opportunity cost. So let's do kind of what we did before. Talk about different combinations of apples and water we're able to produce efficiently, meaning on my PPF curve. Okay, so let's say this is point A. Let's say this is point B. Let's say this is point C. Let's say this is point D. And the way that I wanted to draw this is I wanted to show equal increases in water. Okay, so I know it's not perfect, but imagine going from A to B to C to D. What I'm doing is I'm gaining water. And hopefully if I drew it correctly, okay, I'm gaining the same amount of water each time. Okay, let's say each time I go from A to B to C to D, I'm gaining like 50 gallons of water. But again, everything we do in life comes at an opportunity cost. You cannot get more water without getting less apple. So we're going to start to see opportunity cost. Fewer apples going from A to B, and fewer apples going from B to C, and fewer apples going from C to D. But what you start to see is these opportunity costs, the lost amount of apples, it starts to get relatively larger and larger and larger. Maybe at first, going from point A to point B, you lost something like 5 apples. But then going from point B to point C, you lost something like 20 apples. Going from point C to point D, you lost something like 70 apples. What the crap? Why are you losing larger and larger amounts of apples? Well, it has to do with the fact that apples and water are very, very different products that require very, very different resources. Okay, so you can see that this stuff would be good for the apples, and this stuff, I guess, would be good for the water.
So I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
If the two products
Mm-hmm.
are, if the only thing stopping me from having unlimited gains
Mm-hmm.
is the limited resources,
Mm-hmm.
then if the limited resources don't contradict each other, then why can't I have the maximum amount of apples and the maximum amount of water without one taking from the other?
Hmm. Very good. That's the story of what we're trying to get at here. Okay, so the two products are very, very different, and it looks like the resources, they don't get in the way of each other. I mean, seeds and fertilizer for apple, river and buckets for water. But it's always the case. Whenever we have limited resources, there's going to be opportunity cost. And here, even when the two products are very different from each other, or when the two products are very different from each other, there's going to be this idea of increasing opportunity cost. So think about point A right now. You see that I have a whole lot of apple production, right? How much water production do I have?
None.
None. I'm just making apples. I'm making no water whatsoever. So if you're just making apples, what do you think is going to happen to your amount of seeds and fertilizer?
It's
At
gonna
point A,
increase.
do you have any seeds and fertilizer left over?
No.
No, I used all available resources for my apple production. Now, at point A, do I have the river and the buckets left over?
Yes.
No, because very good, very good. Everyone says no. Okay, but the reason why I cannot have any buckets and river left over is if I do, then by definition, what that means is I'm inefficient. By definition, what that means is I need to be somewhere on the inside of my PPF. Remember, same idea here. Okay, if you're using everything that you have, you're going to be on your PPF curve somewhere. If you're not using everything you have, if you have some wasted resources, you're going to be on the inside of your PPF, very inefficient. So here, at point A, because I'm on the PPF, I used all my seeds and fertilizer, and I used all my river and buckets. It has to be that way.
So how did you use your rivers and buckets? You're only using the
Somehow.
seed and
Yeah,
fertilizers.
yeah. So the river and the buckets really don't help my apple production all that much, but I have to use it. Because if I don't, I'll be up somewhere on the inside of my PPF. So the idea is you use the seeds and the fertilizer, the resources that are good for apple production. You use those guys first. You use those guys very effectively. But you also need to use the river and the buckets. I guess, in this case, it kind of makes sense. Let's say you plant the seeds, you use the fertilizer, and then use the bucket to go over to the river and get some water and pour it over the apple seeds to help it grow more. It kind of sort of makes sense. Okay, so you use everything that you have. Okay, maybe you have a lot of water to the point where it's even more than you need in order to water the plants. Well, I guess then the leftover water, you use it to wash the apples and make them nice and shiny. It really doesn't help the apples all too much, but you have to use everything. Now, we're going to go from point A to point B. So we first start to make water for the first time. For sure, what you're going to do is you're going to start using these resources for your water production first, because those are the resources that are more specialized towards water production. Okay? So you're going to be able to produce a lot more water. It's not going to come at the cost of a lot of apples. You're not going to lose a lot of apples. Okay? Because when you move these resources over to water production, I mean, these guys really weren't all that good for apple production in the first place. Probably the only reason why you start to produce fewer apples is there's two resources that we always need for everything, everything, everything. We need labor and we need capital. You need workers and you need machines or tools. Okay, so when you first start producing water, or putting or producing like a bottled water or something like that, you have to move some workers over. So that way you're going to lose a little bit of apple production. Okay, so at first, when you first start to produce this bottled water, okay, the opportunity cost in terms of lost apple production, it's going to be relatively small. Because again, you're moving over the resources that are good for water production first. But then as you keep on going on, now you start producing even more bottled water. Well, you need to start moving over more workers and more tools. But now what starts to happen is you're starting to use up most of the river. You're starting to use up most of the buckets. So now you have to start using some of the resources that were good for apple production. That's not going to help your water production that much, but it's going to really, really start to hurt your apple production. Okay? So let's say in order to make this bottled water, you used a river, you used the buckets, but now you have to, I don't know, maybe you use some of the apple seeds. Wait, that makes no sense. Why would you do that? Well, let's say you use these apple seeds to somehow filter the water to make it more pure and more clear. Okay, I guess that helps your water production a little bit, but it really, really starts to hurt your apple production. Then, if you keep on going and you extend the story and you start making even more water, well, now you have to start moving over a lot more seeds and fertilizer to your water production. That doesn't really help your water production all that much, but it really, really starts to hurt your apple production a lot. Okay? So as you start to produce more and more and more water, you're going to start to give up larger and larger and larger amounts of apples. Your opportunity cost is going to rise. Same idea if we go the other way. Okay, if we're just making water now, well, you're using all your river and all your buckets. I don't know why, but you're also using all of your seeds and all of your fertilizer. Okay, because we want to be on the PPF curve. But then as you first start to make apples, for sure, the first resources you're going to move over to apple production, it's going to be those seeds and the fertilizer. Well, what that means is your opportunity cost in terms of the lost water, it's not going to be all that big because you're moving over the resources that really weren't good for making water in the first place. But as you start to produce more and more and more and more apples, well, you've pretty much used up all the seeds and the fertilizer. Now you're going to have to start moving over the river and the buckets for your apple production. And that's going to start to hurt your water production a lot. Okay? So that's the idea of increasing opportunity costs. That's the reason why we have this bowed outward PPF curve.
So what if you have
Mhm.
two things that don't contradict each other, like that there's no possible way that you would be able to use one for the other?
It's the same exact story here. Okay, I guess here there's a little bit of overlap. Okay, but let's talk about what did we talk about? Pi and iPhones. Okay, there we go. These are two completely, different products. Okay, I don't think they have any sort of resources in common. Okay, Pi, you need the flour, the sugar, the eggs. For the iPhones, you need computer chips and glass and metal. But again, if we happen to be, let's start here. If we happen to be here on my PPF curve, wait, it's on my PPF curve, so no wasted resources. Even though I'm only making pies, I still need to use all of the metal, the computer chips, and the glass. Okay, so maybe after I make my pie with the sugar and the eggs and the flour, okay, I decorate it with computer chips. I don't know. I make it a smart pie, so it tells me when it's cooked. It tells me when it's cooled off. I don't know. Okay, you decorate it with glass. You put it into a nice metal plate. Again, that really doesn't help my pie production all too much, but I need to use everything. But now from there, let's say from point A again, you start moving over to point B. Now you first start to make iPhones. Well, again, with limited resources, you have to do less of the pie. But at first, you're really not going to make all too much less pie. Maybe a little bit less, but not that much less. The reason is, when you first start to make iPhones, the first resources you're going to move over is going to be the computer chips, the glass, and the metal. That's going to help your iPhone production a lot. It's not really going to hurt your pie production much at all. Okay, you might have a little bit less pies just because you have to move some workers over. But then as you start to make more and more and more iPhones, pretty much the idea is you're starting to use up all of the metal, the computer chips, and the glass. And then now you have to start using some of the resources that were good for making pies. Okay? Like the flour and the sugar. I mean, what does that have to do anything with iPhone production? Okay? But again, if you want to be on your PPF curve, no wasted resources. So here at point D or point E, as you start to make more iPhones, okay, you've pretty much used up all of your iPhone specific resources. You used all the metal, the glass, and the computer chips. And now you're going to start moving over the Pi resources. You're going to make the iPhone and then you're going to dust it with flour and sugar just to make it nice and clean. And then you're going to give it a nice egg wash to make it shiny. I mean, that really doesn't help my iPhone production all that much, but it's really going to start to hurt my Pi production. Okay, so it's one of those stories. So when I have two products that are very, very similar to each other, similar products, like pie and cake. Okay, this is what my PPF curve is going to look like, a nice straight line. Okay, when I have very different products or dissimilar products, well, this is what my PPF usually is going to look like, nice and bowed outward. Okay, by the way, another way of saying that products are similar is by saying that I have non-specialization of resources. Oh man, I just made it tougher. Non-specialization of resources. That means the resources that I have, like flour, eggs, and sugar. I could use it for pie production, but I could also use it for cake production. Those resources are non-specialized. But when I'm talking about different products like the pie and the iPhone, now I start to have very, very specialized resources. It just means that some of the resources are good for pie. Some of the resources are good for iPhone. Okay, for like the example we gave, like the metal, the computer chips, and the glass. That's good for iPhone. It's not really good for pies. Okay, so whenever I have similar products, I'm going to have some sort of constant opportunity cost. Constant opportunity cost. When I have very, very different products, I'm going to have increasing opportunity cost. Make sense?
Yeah. One
Mm-hmm.
last question.
Mm-hmm.
So then does that mean that in the increasing opportunity cost,
Mm-hmm.
D would be the best
No.
place to stay?
No. It depends on what your country likes. Okay, so if my country's like, man, I love pies, I don't really need iPhones. Well, in that case, point A or point B or point C might be better for your country. Okay, but if your country's like, man, I love my smartphone, I don't really like pies all too much. Well, in that case, point E is going to be a lot better. So it all depends on what your country wants. But what I can tell you is point A, point B, point C, point D, point E. They're all equally efficient. Okay, efficient just means no wasted resources. Okay,
Yes.
good. We could talk about this Again, use all of those different lessons from the PPF that we talked about before. Okay, like we said, anything on the PPF, efficient, no wasted resources. Anything on the inside of my PPF, yeah, I guess I could do that. Okay, I have enough resources, but after I produce this many pies and this many iPhones, I'm gonna have a lot of resources left over. Remember, in life, I don't like resources. I like the products, products, products. Okay, so it makes sense to be a lot more efficient. Okay, try to be on your PPF curve. Okay, you could learn a lesson like this. Oh man, that's a lot of pie. That's a lot of iPhones. I would love to be there, but I can't. I can't produce that much because I just don't have enough resources. So we could talk about that idea of economic growth again. Remember, only way to get economic growth is to increase the quantity or the quality of your resources, to get more resources or to get better resources than before. But here with a bowed outward PPF, there's two different ways that your PPF curve is going to shift out. There's going to be two different ways that you have economic growth. Okay, if you increase a non-specialized resource. Okay, so for Pi and iPhones, I needed eggs, flour, sugar. I needed computer chips, glass, and metal. But remember, I also need labor. You need labor for everything. Okay, you need workers. Let's say in this case, you increase the amount of labor that you had. You have more workers. Well, that means you're going to be able to produce more Pi, and you're going to be able to produce more iPhone. Your entire PPF curve shifts outward. Okay, that's how we view economic growth. We're able to do more production now than before. But sometimes what happens here is we increase a specialized resource. That means a resource that's really, really good for one of these products, not the other. Okay, for example, in this case, let's say I increase my availability of eggs. That really does nothing to my iPhone production. That really doesn't help at all. But if I have more eggs, I'm going to be able to produce more pie. So in this case, when you increase a specialized resource, you're not going to be seeing a shift of your PPF curve. More than that, you're going to be seeing a rotation. Okay? You're going to be able to produce more of one of the products, not so much the other one. Okay, and of course, we could do it the other way as well. If I increase, I don't know, let's say I increase my computer chips, really does nothing for my pie production, but it really helps me produce more iPhones. In that case, my PPF curve would have rotated this way. Okay, so whether we have a proportional shift like we do here when we increase a non-specialized resource, or we have some sort of rotation when we increase a specialized resource, for either one of these, for both of these, that's considered economic growth because you're able to produce more now than before. Okay, it just depends on whether you want proportional growth. It's not even that you want. It's whether you have proportional growth or you have growth in one area. Okay. Okay, so we're pretty much done with that topic for now. Okay, in our next class on Thursday, we're going to bring that idea of PPF curve back, and we're going to do something that we do a lot in econ. We're going to take a model that we study, and then we're going to expand on it. Okay, we're going to add some more layers to it and make it a little bit more realistic. Okay, so in the next class, what we're going to do is instead of talking about one country that produces two products, we're going to talk about two countries that produce the same two products. And then from there, we're going to be able to see how these countries are able to help each other by specializing and trading products. Okay, we'll get there. For us here for the rest of the class, we're going to talk about something known as economic systems. Okay, and an economic system is how a country structures their economy. There's two basic types of economic systems, and I think you're pretty comfortable with these already. On one end of the spectrum is something that most people think of as capitalism. Okay, I mean, if you think about the US, if you think about Panama, it's all about capitalism, capitalism, capitalism. Okay, what that means is people are greedy, people are just trying to earn as much money as possible. Okay, another way we say that is our economy follows a free market system. Free market. What that means is you let the people decide what to do. On the very other end of the spectrum, the opposite of capitalism, I guess, you could think of as communism. And in communism, who makes all the decisions about what to do with the economy? It's no longer left to the people who makes the choices now. It's going to be the government. Okay? Instead of a free market system, this is what we call a command system. We call it command because the government is commanding, they're controlling the entire economy. And whenever we talk about economic systems, there's always going to be three questions to be asked. Okay, as a country, as an economic system, what we need to do is we need to determine what goods to produce. Okay, how do we know whether we want to produce desks or chairs or apples or water or iPhones? In a free market system, it's going to be the people who decide. Okay, and what I mean by people is all of the people in the market together. I mean, if you think about it, okay, what gets produced in your economy? Well, in a capitalist system, okay, it's whatever the people want. If it seems like people are demanding iPhones, then iPhones will be produced. Okay, if it seems like people are demanding bottles of water, then bottles of water will be produced. Okay, it's whatever the people want. And of course, the companies, the firms, what they're going to do is they're going to try to predict what the people are going to want, or they're going to try to they're going to try to tell the people what they want. Okay, but it's still a market system. In a command system, who determines what to produce? Well, the government. Okay, it's whatever the government decides. The people on their own cannot decide it. Okay, think about countries like North Korea or a little while ago Venezuela. Okay, the government is going to control everything. They're going to dictate what all of these different companies are going to be able to produce. Okay. The next question is, once we figure out what to produce, we need to figure out how to produce it. In a capitalist free market system, again, it's the people. Okay, or in this case, it's the business owners who decide. And the great thing about capitalism is if people are greedy and they're just trying to earn as much money as possible, that's going to lead to a lot of efficiency. Because if you think about it, there's two ways of earning more profit for yourself. You could either try to earn more money or you could try to spend less money. And that's what all of these companies are going to try to do. They're going to try to spend as little money as possible. They're going to try to get as efficient as possible. They don't want to waste anything. Okay? Not because they really care about efficiency, but because they care about profits. Okay? So free markets are fantastic. Let people be greedy. Let them try to earn as much money as possible. It's going to lead the economy to become very, very efficient. On the other end, okay, for communism or command system, when the government decides what to produce, the government also is going to determine how to produce it. Okay, they're going to go to these business owners and say, "Oh, you know what? You guys are going to produce cars for me, and you guys over there, you guys are going to produce tanks, and you guys over there, you guys are going to produce airplanes." The people themselves don't get to decide. It's the government that tells them what to do, and the government is going to tell them how to produce it. They're going to tell you, okay, in this factory, I want you to build car engines. Okay, and they're going to give you all the instructions. They're going to tell you exactly what you need to do. Now, in a perfect world, okay, with a very, very, very smart government, and with a government that really, really, really cares about its people, a command system or communism might not really be all that bad. It might actually work. Okay, the problem with capitalism is because there's so many people making the decisions together. Sometimes it gets a little bit crazy. Okay, very difficult to control. Okay, but with communism, with the command system, you are in control. The government does, they control every aspect of the economy. Okay, now again, if they were good, if they were kind, then communism would work. But out of all the example of communism that we've seen in history, okay, the government has never been good. Okay, the government has never been smart enough to manage everything. More than that, the government has never, ever, 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 ever been kind enough to make it work. What that means is the government cares a lot more for the government itself than for the people. Okay, there's going to be a lot of corruption. There's going to be a lot of government officials hiding things just to make their lives better off. Okay, and it's going to make the workers' lives much, much worse off. Okay, and finally, after we figure out what to produce, how to produce it, after those products are finally made, we need to decide who gets it. In a free market system, again, it's the people, all the people in the market, all together, who decide who gets the product. Okay, and it's usually just the case that the products go to whoever values the product the most. Whoever is willing to pay the most for it gets it. But in a communist command system, well, it's going to be the government again who determines who gets the goods. And this is where it starts to get very, very unfair. Okay, again, if we had a benevolent dictator or a benevolent government, a government that really cared about the people, then they would try to distribute all of these products equally to make sure that everyone has a very high standard of life. Okay, but of course, there's corruption, and it seems like either it's the government officials or the friends of the government officials who get all the good stuff, and everybody else gets crap. Okay, so we have these two extremes again. Okay, capitalism, where the market, the buyers and the sellers, all the people together, they determine what to produce, how to produce it, and gets it. On the other end, we have communism, where the government determines what to produce, how to produce it, and who gets it. But there's no country that's going to be pure capitalism. There's no country where the government just completely takes their hands off and just lets people do what they want to do. That's craziness. Okay, and it's going to lead to a lot of problems. So even a country that's very capitalistic, like the US, they're not purely capitalistic. That wouldn't work. Okay, so most of the time, the government takes their hands off and they let the markets, they let the people decide what to do. But there's always going to be laws. There's always going to be rules and regulation that the consumers and the producers need to follow. Okay, so in that case, it's capitalism, but the government does step in every once in a while. What we call that is a mixed system, a little bit of a mix between free market and command. But for the US, they're going to be much closer to capitalism. Okay, and we don't have any example of a purely communist country where the government controls 100% of the economy. Okay, even a country like North Korea, where you think it's very communist and the government has a huge role. Even in North Korea, the government is not going to control every little market. They're not going to control every single product. It's just too much work. Okay, they're not going to be able to manage all that. So most of the big things like food production or military defense, okay, the government for sure is going to control all of that important stuff. But for the little things like I don't know, the market for a pack of gum or for popcorn or stuff like that. I mean, the government is not going to worry about that kind of stuff. They'll let the people figure that out on their own. Okay, so countries like North Korea are very close to pure communism, but not completely. They're also going to be a mixed system somewhere in the middle, okay, but much closer to communism. Okay, there we go. I'll tell you right now, there's no point in studying command systems, okay, because I mean, economics just really doesn't work all too well with command systems because it's just the government that controls and dictates everything. So we're going to be focusing mainly on capitalism, but more than pure capitalism, we'll be talking about a mixed system where um, every once in a while, or even a lot of the times, the government is going to step in to change the situation. Sometimes they make it better. A lot of the times they're going to make it worse. Okay? All right. So we're done with this first little introductory section about econ. In the next class, we'll talk about more of the PPF with specialization and trade. Okay?
Yes.
All right. I'll see you on Thursday.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Bye.